Welcome, everyone. Good evening. It's a pleasure and honor for me to be with you this evening. This session, Neuro-Semantics Series, we are having it every month, the first Thursday of the month. So Franska and Dr. Anwar, they are regulars for the session. For this Neuro-Semantic series, our focus is basically on neurosemantics. And we've been having these sessions for how long, Franska? I think close to 2 years already, yeah? Yeah, close to 2 years already. The meta coaching session, 3 years already for that one. And the objective is to go in deeper if the situation requires it, or maybe go in at the more general level about neurosemantics, because we have people joining in who have not been introduced to neurosemantics or even NLP, and we welcome them. And there are also people who have been learning neurosemantics, like Franska, since 2000, what, 2015, eh?
So long already, oh my God.
It's wonderful. So what we are looking at, just now, Dr. Anwar was giving an example that relates to Steve Jobs. One of the things that I admire about Steve Jobs is that to a certain extent, he's not bothered about technology, because Apple is never about technology. However, he's bothered about making people's lives easier, and he uses technology to make people's lives easier. So that's why Apple products, whether the Macintosh or the iPhone, they never sell it on the technical specification. They sell it on the benefits that you gain when you use it. So bringing that, I would say that parallel into what we are doing over here. So our approach is not so much about being so overly critical about neurosemantics and all the technical details. Our focus is how can we use this discipline or this technology of NLP and neurosemantics to make our lives easier. So that's why frequently I don't even mention this is neurosemantics or this is NLP. I don't even mention that. It's just about going, so if we were to do things this way, then things become easier for us. It's just that in this session, since it is called Neuro-Semantics Series, so that's when this jargon, this language of neurosemantics starts to come in. So if you are new to neurosemantics and NLP and you are not sure of some of the words that I'm using, please by all means stop me, check, ask what I was referring to, because the tendency is that I might get carried carried away with it. Okay, so this evening what we'll be discussing about, the topic is the neurosemantics differences from NLP. And this is useful for me as well, after being in this field for years, coming to 15 years already now in this field of neurosemantics. This is useful for me to be able to notice the nuances, the distinctions of how I can make things different, or how I can make things better using what I've come to accept as neurosemantics and NLP. Now, first thing I would just want to mention again, even though the topic is the neurosemantics differences from NLP, just like what we did last month, was to recognize that neurosemantics developed from NLP. Without NLP, there will be no neurosemantics. So that's the first one. Now, the next question that we can ask is there a difference between NLP and neurosemantics? Because if there is no difference, why should we use a different name? And the next question is, if there is a difference, is it critical and significant, or is it peripheral? And the next question is, what are the differences between NLP and neurosemantics, if there is a difference? So what we are going to do in this evening is basically to sort for difference. So this is the one of the meta program of information sorting, to sort for difference, in the sense that we are not comparing the difference between NLP and neurosemantics for the sake of trying to determine which one is better and which one is not. No, it is not for that sake, because how can one be better than the other? Because neurosemantics developed from NLP, so that's not the purpose of having this discussion. However, we are sorting for difference in order to gain critical distinctions on how processes and approaches operate differently for more effectiveness and efficiency. So that's the reason why we are looking for the differences, not about saying this is better than the other. No, they are, I would say, from the same roots. If you want to trace back the roots, it goes back to the human potential movement and humanistic psychology of you can associate those with Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, and all of those people. So that's the similar roots, right? So going back to the question, is there a difference between NLP and neurosemantics? Yes, the answer is yes. So is the difference critical and significant, or is just merely peripheral? The answer to that one is also yes, it is. The difference is critical and significant, and it is a critical one. Okay, so what are the differences between NLP and neurosemantics? That's what we'll be discussing for this evening. Now, before we go into the discussion, just a frame for us to think about what we'll be discussing this evening is that the points that I'm bringing for our discussion this evening came from an article. Michael wrote the article. Dr. Michael Hall wrote this article, and it's called The Neuro Semantics Differences from NLP. And what he mentioned in that article regarding these differences that we will be discussing are that these are not absolute statements. It is only general ones. For example, what neurosemantics has mostly done is to much more fully develop the referencing, reflexivity, apply to self, community systems. Yeah. So this doesn't mean that those are not in NLP. They are in NLP. It's just that neurosemantics has developed that a little bit further. At its heart, neurosemantics difference begin with the attitude of apply to self. And for me, that was one of the things that attracted me to want to learn more about neurosemantics, is this term called apply to self. You learn something, you apply to yourself. And this is part of, to a certain extent, we can say, the criteria for us to learn neurosemantics. This focus, applying to self, leads to more congruency, more willingness to look at ourselves, to use the processes on ourselves, and to consciously aim to continually grow and improve. Because this field is the field of human development. So when we apply to ourselves, then we are helping ourselves to develop. So in turn, this leads to being more open and to honestly acknowledge the facets of NLP that we have found which do not work or are overemphasized to the exclusion of something else. None of this is to say that one is right or better, but rather to point out the differences, especially in terms of focus and direction. The neurosemantics difference supremely lies in an attitude, in an intentional stance about who we are, who use the model. So it is not just about learning the model and applying it wholesale. It's about learning the model and intentionally apply to ourselves so that we can develop ourselves. And to a larger extent, what Michael wrote in the article, neurosemantics is an attitude that grows out of relationship and that leads to relationship backed up by the methodology of modeling, and that leads to hundreds of powerfully transforming patterns. And that is the area that I am focused most right now. It is in the area of relationship. So that's probably what I would just like to mention as an introduction before we go in further. And I'd like to welcome Hashim, who's just joined us. Good to see you, Hashim. So what we are going to do is, compared to what we did last month, we went into the differences in terms of models. There were 5 models used in NLP, and with neurosemantics, we came up with an additional 9 models. So those are the technical specification. What we are looking for this week is more the differences in terms of usage and application. And more importantly, the major difference between neurosemantics and NLP is the approach to learning it. And we'll be going into deeper. What I have just mentioned just now was the major approach about neurosemantics is apply to self. We learn it to make ourselves better. It is not about learning it to do it on people. It's about learning it to improve ourselves. If by improving ourselves, we are able to help others improve themselves, that's all fine and good. The primary focus is for ourselves. Okay, any questions or comments before we go to the next point? No comments.
One question.
Yes.
I used to hear people say sometimes neuro NLP they use for not so good reasons, like trance, because trance to many people is putting into the negative part of it. But when I enter into this neurosemantic or trance is something which is for the ecological part of it.
Yes.
Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yes, I can mention a little bit now, and as we go into the next points, I'll come back to this one again. What's his name? Uncle Ben in Spider-Man. Uncle Ben, we call him. So as he says, with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah. The technology of NLP is really powerful. As Anthony Robbins, he used to say, now, if he were to do that now, we know he can do that easily, but he said this, I can make a woman fall in love with me within 45 minutes. Because that's the amount of power that the technology has, the technology within NLP gives you the structure to elicit the way that a person's mind works and to present information according to the way that mind works, and that information becomes so influential for the person that the person can readily agree with you. So that's the extent of power. It's just that it comes with great responsibility. So power used in an irresponsible way brings a lot of harm. So that's the reason why in neurosemantics, our mantra is apply to self first. And in the points that we are going to cover later, in neurosemantics, our focus is not just in the techniques. Our focus is on the relationship. So that part of ecology comes in. So when we apply to ourselves, looking at ecology, we will make use of the power in a way that will be beneficial for both instead of exploiting the other person. Because with this power, you can, and many people did use this power of NLP to exploit others. So I'm not surprised you've come across that, because I would say prior to about 15 years ago, NLP came burst into this world in the late 80s, coming into the 90s, in the late 80s. However, because of many individuals who abused the power, it nearly died in America, the country of birth. It nearly died there because too many people were, the word is, abusing that power to overpower other people. And it only managed to stay alive because by that time it has already been exported to other countries, and the practices in other countries was not so, the word is, not so taking advantage of others. So now what is happening is that NLP is trickling back into America. It's strong. It's strong in the UK. It's strong in Asia, in Australia. In America, it has lost its luster because of Hashim, what you mentioned just now. People abuse them. Okay, so that is why when Michael and Bob came up with neurosemantics, that's why the first principle that they insist is apply to self first, because during that time in early 1990s, around 94, 95, almost mid 1990s, the field of NLP was almost self-destructing. And it was self-destructing because people were learning NLP to use on others. So they noticed the issue was using NLP on others for a self-serving interest, and that nearly destroyed NLP. Because people just blacklisted NLP in that sense. So that's how Neurosemantic was birthed by Michael and Bob Bodenhammer. What they figured out is that to prevent that happening, to have that singular motto of applying to self first. So that's why that one is central to neurosemantics. I hope that's useful for you, Hashim. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so welcome, Sue. Glad to see that you are here with us this evening.
Hello.
Hi, good to see you. Now let's move to actually in the article that I mentioned, where what we are discussing come from, Michael listed something close to 18 differences. And I thought we are not going to be able to cover that in 1 hour. So using 7 plus minus 2, so instead of 7 plus 2, I go for 7 minus 2. So I'm going to cover about 5 points, 5 differences. Otherwise, you'll be here for the whole night. Now, the first difference between NLP and neurosemantics is from representation. Representation, we are talking about the map. Yeah? NLP is mainly about representation. Neurosemantics, we go into referencing. You have your map. However, your map, you are referencing it with your understandings, your frames, your beliefs, your values. Those are meta level frames. The focus in NLP, and this is the genius of NLP actually, is on the representation. You observe what's happening out there and you take it and represent it on the movie screen of your mind. So that's the genius of NLP. Recognizing that we think in terms of our sensory system and uses what we see, hear, feel, smell, and taste to represent to ourselves within our minds, give us control to run our own brain. Because now that we have that movie, we can make some changes to the brightness, to the loudness of the sound, the brightness of the picture, to the softness of the texture. So by changing the representation, we experience a change in how we are experience that thing. So we have a movie mind, and this empowers us to take charge of what plays out in the theater of our mind. Oftentimes, the simplest shifts or alterations in the cinematic features. In NLP, we call them the sub-modalities. When we change those cinematic features, our understanding of what's happening out there also changes. So just making the small changes. It could be an example. I enjoy this example about a friend of mine who was, he said that he's afraid of puppies. Not the full-grown dogs, but the puppy, the newborn puppies. Because he says that newborn puppies, they are so very soft, and you touch it, it is almost like wet, and you just go like that. So because he was representing that puppy in that particular way, he gets into this trauma in his body. So we played around with that. We make some changes about from bright, we make it dimmer, from large, we make it smaller. The movie, yeah, and the sounds, make changes to the sounds, make changes to the texture and all that. And the moment we make those changes, he can think about a puppy and it's okay. So this is the genius of NLP, noticing that we represent things in our mind. The way that we represent it causes us to respond neurologically in a certain way. The moment we make changes to those, then our responses also change, right? Now, the focus in neurosemantics moves on from the representation, just the movie, yeah? It moves from the representation to the references and the referencing. So this representation, what are we referencing to? What are our frames about this? So first we bring in the world by taking the reference event and representing it. From there, we transform the event into frames of reference and then becomes frames of mind. This moves us up the levels as we classify, categorize our learnings from that event. In this way, we create layers upon layers of embedded frames that make up the matrix of our mind. And those layers emerge organically as the mind-body system grows. In moving up the levels, we do this primarily in language, hence the true place for the linguistic of NLP and the symbolic levels of neurosemantics. So the frames are composed of the linguistic part. And the moment we change the linguistics, so now we are moving away from the rep, see, hear, feel, touch, or taste. We are moving away from the rep, now going into the language. We can make changes to the languaging up here. It makes change to our neurology. So that's the one major difference. So instead of just relying on the representations, we have that layer of language. Okay, so that's the first point. Moving away from representation to referencing. So any questions or comments? Okay, good. So that's the first point. The second point is, this is to me a very meaningful one. From techniques to persons in relationship. So the difference is in NLP, the focus is on techniques. In neurosemantics, our focus is on persons in relationship. Much of the power of NLP is that it has focused so much on techniques and has developed many powerful techniques and patterns that allows a communicator, therapist, hypnotist, manager to do things to people. Yet, this has also had many unfortunate consequences. It has led lots of people to judge NLP as manipulative and focus only on programming into others without proper balance on relationship, rapport, ethics, or ecology. So Hashim, this one addresses that question that you asked earlier. Okay, in many places in Europe, NLP is known so much for its techniques that it is also criticized for the same thing, that it is only about techniques and the model is but a collection of techniques. And that was one of the confusion that I felt after I attended my first practitioner program, because in the practitioner program, I learned all of these patterns. So many patterns, so many techniques. Then I go out and when I see people, which one to use on this fella? So it's about which technique to use on people. Yeah, I learned NLP first from the traditional way and later on learning the neurosemantics approach to it. And that caused me quite a lot of confusion in the sense that, am I doing it right? Is this technique useful for this person? So I had that doubt running inside of me. The focus on techniques has also brought out another NLP neuro-semantic difference. NLP is mostly trained from a meta program of procedures, whereas neurosemantic is mostly trained from an options point of view. And this is one of the things that many people first notice in our trainings. Remember the meta programs of options and procedures? Yeah. So we have options and procedures. In NLP, it is more about procedures. It has to go A, B, C, D. Even with the TOTE model, it is more of a linear model rather than a non-linear model. So what neurosemantics does is it brings in the options perspective to what's happening out there. The neurosemantics focus much more on persons and relationship than on techniques. So that's where the options come in. We are going in and understanding the person first instead of thinking about which technique to use. While there are many patterns and processes, the overarching idea in neurosemantics is to make sure that the technology serves people and is offered in a healthy, balanced, ecological, and human way. So it is not about, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier in the beginning, it is not about the specification, what you can do, all the gadgets, gizmos that we have in NLP. It is about you as a person and how can NLP or neurosemantics serve you better. So it is not about the techniques, it's about the person. To that end, neurosemantics puts the focus on personal context, on co-creating a solution with a client or customer, and on operating in win-win relationships with others. And this is part of the vision for neurosemantics as a community and movement. Okay, so that's the second difference. So any comments or questions? Dr. Anwar, you would like to comment something?
No, sorry. No.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
So meaning to say, it start from the person rather than the techniques. So this is the key difference between NLP and neurosemantics. So the focus is on the person.
Yes.
To be more resourceful rather than the techniques of, say, for example, or how do I get rid of phobias? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah. If I get what you said properly, I relate it to also my way of thinking after I learned NLP for the first time. My tendency was to be more like diagnostic. When I meet somebody, I want to diagnose what's the problem so that I can bring in the solution. Whereas from the neurosemantics perspective, we are looking at the person as a whole. And one of the primary assumptions in neurosemantics, and that assumption comes from humanistic psychology, is the assumption that people are both sane and well. People are not broken. So why should I look at people and try to figure out how to fix that person? The person is not broken. So that's why the approach is person-centered, to understand the person, to know what's in the person's ecology, and to notice if they are needing any areas of greater empowerment. That's all. So it's not about fixing people. However, that was my original understanding about NLP. You look at people, oh, Franska look like this, or maybe she has got this problem, or then I can use this pattern on her.
Mazuki, I had the same problem as well. In the beginning, when I just attend your class, after I attend, then I try to want to help my colleague all that. But slowly it changed. Okay. Now I'm okay already.
Yes.
Yeah, it's something like a consultant that goes in and say, "Oh, I'm the solution provider. I provide the solution." Not really understanding the basic the neurosemantics part of the client.
Yes. Yes.
That's why they feel, and then they say, I'm lost. Why they are not getting from me?
As a consultant, So as a consultant, when I go and meet a client and say that I'm a solutions provider, I am presupposing that you have a problem.
But whereas the problem is if he's the consultant.
So human beings are fun, right? Okay, let's take the next point. The difference between NLP and neurosemantics is from doing to others to apply to self. NLP is focused on doing to others. Neurosemantics, our focus is to apply to self. NLP certainly has the power for us to work magic on people. That's what Bandler and Grinder found as they model Satir, Pearls, and Erickson. And so they wrote about the structure of magic. The problem with this is that the focus is on the NLP practitioner doing something to the client. And when that's the focus, then the frames by implication is that the person doing it to another doesn't do it on himself. And that's why in the early days of NLP, it was quite rough. Rough in the sense that the people who are learning NLP are not actually doing on themselves. They don't even know how to do it on themselves. They only know how to do it on others. So as a consequence, NLP as a model had a lot of criticism and bad press because of that. Many NLPers who haven't applied the model to themselves do not even know how to do it. And that leaves them not walking the talk and so being incongruent. And they give NLP a bad name. In neurosemantics, apply to self is built into the model. This has also become a major focus and emphasis. Apply the magic first to yourself and only to others. Doing this enables neurosemanticists to walk the talk, receive the benefits of the magic personally, and to then be walking examples and models of the powerful tools and patterns. So it makes for personal congruency and personal power. APG being, you can call it the flagship flagship entry into neurosemantics. How did Michael come up with APG? He tested it on himself. He tested and tested until it worked. Only then he brought it out and taught it and trained it to others. Yeah? And one of the things that you can do with APG is to create your own state of flow, to be in the zone, your genius state. And Michael created that very well for himself. Humorously, he mentioned an incident where he was traveling from one airport to another airport. So he was at one at the airport taking a flight, and while waiting for the flight, he opened his book, started reading. It was a shuttle flight, so he can take one flight, another. He started reading. He missed 4 flights. Because he's so focused on reading, he didn't hear his name being called. So that's why now what he says is that when you create your flow zone, your genius state, you maximum 90 minutes, 40 to 90 minutes, because it takes a lot of energy for you to be focused on one thing. So after 90 minutes break, for maybe a half an hour or so, go and do something else, become diffuse in your thinking. And then when you want to go into the genius state for another activity, by all means, go ahead and do that. Don't be in the genius state for more than 90 minutes. So this is this is referring to applying to self. So he came up with a whole training program on APG just by making changes about himself, testing it on himself, and knowing that, hey, it works, and then bringing out to others. So that is at the core of a neurosemantics. So any comments or questions there?
Yeah, it's very true, because the book Figuring Out People, he did mention about some people, they miss flight. I think he is speaking from his own experience.
Yes.
Because one of the thinking, yeah, one of the patterns he did mention. So I was, oh, when you relate that, oh, he is actually sharing his experience.
Yes. Yeah. Another of our leaders, the neurosemantics leaders, Omar Salam. Omar Salam is in Mexico. Yeah, in Mexico. And he was mentioning that one time he stayed with Michael in his home in Grand Junction. And he woke up one morning and he wanted to go out and use the small gym that Michael has. So he had to go out, take one door out, and to go into that gym. And as he went out, he noticed Michael was working on his laptop. And as he went out, he missed holding the door, and the door just slammed, very loud slam. And Omar just went, oh dear, I might have disturbed Michael working. So he went for his workout, and when he came back, he noticed that Michael has already stopped working. And then he said to Michael, Michael, I'm sorry if I disturb you with that banging of the door. And Michael went, what door? I didn't hear anything. And most recently, he created the genius state for sleep. And Geraldine, his wife, mentioned that he can just go and lie down in less than a minute. He'll be in deep sleep. So that's about applying to self, from doing to others to apply to self. So the fourth one here is the difference between NLP and neurosemantics is from power over others to power with others, or authenticity here. With NLP's focus on techniques, it followed that there has been a strong emphasis on power, success, and effectiveness. And this shows up in the advertising and marketing of NLP, and we see that even until today. It shows up in the seminars and training. This over-focus on power and materialistic success predominates as focus on relationship, wisdom, ecology, community. Those all take the back seat. It also explains why there's been so much bad press around the theme of manipulation. Of course, using this word power here refers to the traditional sense of power over others, rather than in the sense of power with others. Neurosemantics, from the very beginning, has held the vision that emphasizes on relationship, being authentic, connecting with others, conducting business ethically, and creating win-win relationships that believe in abundance for all. So to be truly successful, Neuro-Semantics stresses the wealth of connection and relationships and power with others as equals and colleagues. The foundation of this is being true to oneself. So in many Neuro-Semantics training, we have consciously focused on balancing being, doing, and having, especially in those trainings on building wealth and personal mastery. Personal power and authenticity can go together, but it is not the old definitions of power as power over others, doing things to others apart from their awareness and so on. Personal power in the sense of being personally effective, taking effective action, achieving one's goals, and getting things done. So in neurosemantics, we see that as the natural outcome of finding one's own talents, passions, values, and so on. So that's why the focus is on, when we talk about gaining power, it's about gaining power of our four central powers: thinking, feeling, saying, and doing, and using those powers responsibly towards others. So that's why the power that we talk about in neurosemantics is about the power over self rather than the power over others. And as I say that, over the last month or so, I've been watching quite a bit of historical drama, documentaries, and it's been there for us to see. However, watching it after one documentary over another just highlights the point that we human beings have been so cruel towards human beings. We've been using our power to subjugate, to enslave other human beings. So the example that I was watching, the example during the samurai era in Japan, during the Qing dynasty in China, during the Mongolian empire. It's all about using power over others. So it is, for me, refreshing to be able to learn that in neurosemantics, what we say about power is power over ourselves and using that power for the benefit of others. So any questions, comments, reflection?
Yeah, when you talk about power, I think generally the society has been overwhelmed by too much of Hollywood movies, yeah, or the Hindustani movies. I got a friend of mine, a neighbor actually. He's a professional engineer by profession, but those days the VHS videotape, he got a collection from the floor right up to the ceiling.
Wow.
Hindustani movies. And that is, to him, power is to manipulate, make use of others. I think that is where the learnings of neurosemantics is important to put ourselves away from that power in the wrong perspective.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Ashim, for the insight. Yeah. Anyone else? Sue, do you have anything to say, to contribute?
You know, people say history is written by the one who wins. So what we see is like the Japanese samurai, all that, the monuments, be Taj Mahal, all that. It's all, yeah, it's all majestic, to see. But how much life was lost building those buildings and monuments? Even you hear these days, Dubai and places like that. The foreign workers, literally die on the, on the construction sites.
Yeah.
But they have forgotten. But what you see is that big, tall building that we all admire, or even people admire, but we don't know what happened behind all that that went on. So it's just power. Is history written by the winners who owns the power. That's it. Thank you.
I was stunned because Joanna Lumley, Hashim, you remember her? Joanna Lumley. She with BBC, she anchored the show, 3 shows. One is traveling down Japan, it's a travel show. Then along the Silk Road, and also the Trans-Siberian Highway. So for the Trans-Siberian Highway, she stopped at one location near to the Great Wall of China, and she was talking to the historian there. And that particular historian was mentioning that in building the Great Wall of China, Dr. Anwar, you mentioned about people dying in order to build this building. In building the Great Wall of China, about 1 million people a year died in building that. So it's very sobering we look at history as a way of learning, to find what we can learn, and looking at the way that we human being, and I identify myself as a human being, and I see my ancestors being so cruel to other human beings. I am appalled. I do not want that. And taking that as a lesson, bringing it to the here and now, my decision is to not be cruel to other human beings. My decision is to be loving and kind to the human beings that I interact now. Because I can see that if I do not handle that space properly, I can become like those, and I don't want that. So it is about looking at history, learning from there, bringing the lessons so that I can take my action for the future. And that jives well with what we are learning in neurosemantics. Is about getting that power over self and using that power that I have of myself in ways that are beneficial to others. So that's the approach that we have in neurosemantics. Okay, let's take on the final point for this evening. The final point is from primary. In NLP, we focus on the primary level. In neurosemantics, we go to the meta level. While NLP speaks about meta levels, meta position, and neurological levels, it focuses mostly on the primary level. It does so to its glory as it speaks about the representational level of the sensory systems and the distinctive features of one's internal movie. It also does, yet to its own detriment, when it confuses beliefs, values, criteria as if they were primary level phenomena. These are meta level phenomena. After all, these are not primary level phenomena, but meta states. These are layered thoughts and feelings about various ideas. And that's why merely shifting the cinematic features, in NLP jargon, sub-modality, seldom works. And that is why I was, to a certain extent, curious. As I learned NLP in the traditional sense, it's all about anchoring states that are resourceful, anchoring states that are useful for that particular area. And that's how during that time came this mantra of fake it until you make it. So it's all about the primary state and not looking at the meta level states. So from beginning with meta states, so we have this meta states, neurosemantics focuses on the layering of level upon level and the systemic nature of the meta levels. Here, our emphasis moves from linear nature of NLP that focuses so much on the externals to our focus on the internal thoughts and our layering of them. By distinguishing the levels and seeing how we layer frame upon frame to create the embedded frames of any given matrix, neurosemantics provides principles, guidelines for dealing with this richness of interaction. In moving up the meta levels, our challenge lies not so much as to what is out there at the primary level, but in how we apply the higher level meanings to those events. These are the inner games to win the outer game. Focus now shifts to how we have interpreted the event, how that interpretation has impacted our lives. After all, the impact that anything has on us lies in the meanings that we give to it. So our meta level meanings creates the difference that makes the difference. And that is why neurosemantics places its focus on how we utilize and reframe our meta levels for the best impact in our lives. And my experience in doing this is that it gives me, the word is, it gives me life ability to make changes up here in order to impact my body. So instead of getting into an unresourceful state and releasing anchor of a resourceful state to take charge of my state in the present moment, noticing that I'm moving into the unresourceful state, I begin to play about with my meta levels, meta states. That immediately modulates the unresourceful state. And in resilience, there is a term that is called super resilience. Super resilience is when we talk about resilience, is about the ability to bounce back after a setback. So for many people, when they suffer a setback, then they go through the recovery process. They go through the emotional roller coaster, they go through the acceptance, and they are able to bounce back. Now, the resilient person is somebody who's able to go through that process in a very short time period. It can be a few days or a few hours. A person who is less resilient may go through that process a few months or even years in order to bounce back. So a resilient person, within a few hours or few weeks, they are able to bounce back. And yet there is another category of people that we call super resilient. These are people, as they are experiencing a setback because of the dynamic metastating that they are doing. That event that causes setbacks to others doesn't cause setback to themselves. So these are the super resilience. For example, we have this scenario of COVID-19 that hit us exactly a year ago. So for the normal person, they suffer this setback of COVID-19, not being able to do their business, not being able to go out. they suffer the setback, they go into the emotional roller coaster. And that is why in 2020, the medical fraternity are very worried about mental issues, mental health, because people who go through this setback, they needed time, they needed help in order to come back up. Now, super resilient person, when the event of COVID-19 happen, they don't even go, they don't even experience a setback because they are already metastating it. And I think about a couple of days ago, I read an article written by somebody in the personal finance area. He was commenting on Warren Buffett's letter to the investors. You know, Warren Buffett, he takes in investors into the company. Every year he would write what they call, and these letters to investors become very well known. People who are into finance, into investing, they look forward to Buffett's letters because it is rich in that sense. Now, this writer, what he mentioned was, it is not so much as what he wrote that struck him, the writer, as significant, but what he did not write about. You see, he wrote the letter at the end of December, and the letter doesn't say anything about COVID-19. I'm sure his investments suffered a setback during 2020. But his focus wasn't there because it's just is. So it was, to him, it's just an event. So he didn't even suffer that setback. So this is where metastating, when you have the skill of metastating, to be able to go into the meta levels, what happened is that that process of metastating becomes inbuilt inside of you to the extent that when an event occurs that causes setback in others, it doesn't even cause a setback for you because of the dynamic metastating that you are experiencing, because you have that full control over your thinking, feeling process. Okay, so that's point number 5. So I'd like to invite questions or comments from you from that point.
When you mentioned about what an event or a pandemic affecting others, but it doesn't affect oneself, that is a super okay. There are people, I mean, in real life, our friends and people around us who feel or think and feel that the world rests on their shoulders. So I think this is where the meanings in neuro-semantics help, that people were not aware or take it that everything that happens out there also rests on their shoulders. And they're so I mean, pathetic in the sense that they got worried for no reasons, they got stressed for no reasons, and they have been talking about following through the daily trends of COVID-19. Yeah, so that adds the salt to the to the wound.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's all about the meanings. So when you have the ability to control, manage your meta levels, not denying the seriousness of COVID-19. We accepting the seriousness is just, instead of moving out of fear, now you're moving through caution, just finding ways and means to overcome that. Because, for example, Warren Buffett, he's what, 80 plus? So you can consider him to be in the high risk group, and accepting that he's in the high risk group. All that he does is that take the necessary precautions. What happens, happens, but I'm putting in my precautions, and that's it. Investing continues on.
Donald Trump is also on high risk because his age is more than 70.
Siapa?
Donald Trump.
Oh, yes. He's high risk. Do you know that he took a vaccine in January without letting anybody know? He was infected. He was treated for that. However, secretly in January, he took the vaccine. Secretly. Yeah.
It only happens in the US, not in Malaysia.
In Malaysia, 50,000 ringgit fine. Yeah, so we put in there very sneaky. Yeah. That one, let's not talk about that. I might go on for another hour because of that. But looking at what we have just mentioned, and with respect to 5 points, the differences between neurosemantics and NLP, and my own self-reflection about human behavior, how we have been so uncivilized to the extent that we kill other human beings for our own power, for our own pleasure, for our own sport. We have done that. And now coming to the here and now, to learn to live in ways that are loving and kind to our fellow human being. And this is also something that in neurosemantics we have been bringing to promote, bringing it to the front, that we treat each other as equals. And this is something that in the neurosemantics community, I am noticing the way that Michael is leading. For example, when we have meetings, we'll sit in a circle rather than a table where you have somebody at the head of the table and others are at the bottom of the table. So sitting in a circle gives every person their own personal space, that you are equal. So these are ways that we practice this concept of respecting other human beings and to live as equals, to respect the differences and not to hurt or harm one another. So these are embedded within neurosemantics in itself. This part of applying to self rather than doing unto others, and to be able to frame our mind in that particular way. Yeah. Okay, so we've come to the end of the session for this evening. I hope that the 5 points mentioned here gave you some additional insights about NLP and neurosemantic. The first difference is that moving from representation to referencing. The second difference from techniques to persons in relationships. The third point is from doing to others to apply to self. The fourth point is from power over others to power with others, because this is about authenticity. And the fifth point is from primary to meta level. So these are what are the 5 points that I've brought into this discussion for this evening. I hope that it's been useful for you. So before we end, I'd just like to invite each and every one of you, if you'd like to say something to this meeting. So just checking, TYJ, are you able to give us some input, whether through chat or through words? No, so you have video or audio only there. That's okay. How about you, Sue?
Yeah, it's been interesting, and I'm sorry I actually got the timing wrong, so I was late. But just out of curiosity, to learn because you brought up the differences between neurosemantics and NLP. So when you actually want to go into neurosemantics, is there a need to study NLP and then as the base first, and then go into neurosemantics?
Thank you. Yeah. Again, NLP is built on, neurosemantics is built on NLP. So when you study NLP from the neurosemantics, so it is all there. Yeah, so you don't need to study NLP and then study neurosemantics. So what we have done, for example, like let's say if you want to take the practitioner program, all of what people learn in the NLP practitioner program is there. It's just that with the addition of the meta states model. We discussed that last month. So you don't need to study traditional NLP and then learn neurosemantics, because we've covered everything inside there already. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Anwar, anything from you?
I just want to say, when you talk about power and how the people use it, I also I'm amazed in a way, or very admiringly say, like people like Dr. Fauci, the US, right? He's not young also, he's like 70 plus already. Yet they are like in the game and very active, they haven't given up and sitting watch TV or whatever that we call these days, right? They are still very active in that field. The contribution they make to in their field, their mankind, and so on. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
They didn't stop working. They don't stop working.
So this indicates to us that what he does, the work that he does, has high value meanings to him. They are very valuable and meaningful to him, and that's why he wants to continue doing that. And this comes with the skill of meaning making. It's a shame that a lot of people not learning the skill of meaning making, and because of that they demean the activities that they need to do, and that's how these things like thank God it's Friday comes up, because they hate their jobs, they hate their bosses, they hate the company they're working in. They are just waiting for the weekend to come. So somebody like Dr. Fauci, he has this high level meanings about the work that he does, because and I can appreciate that, because the work that he does is to protect all of the public of America, if he was given the chance. It's just that in the previous establishment he wasn't given the full chance to do that. So that's why now he's coming back. He's been given the chance to help America get out of that pandemic situation, and we are grateful for people like that. Yeah? And that's why Michael also mentioned that he has not met a person below 50 who is not yet, who is already self-actualizing. Is that process, so that perspective in order to come to the point of being altruistic, of being other-serving rather than self-serving. So when we talk about self-serving, don't talk about other-serving and not self-serving. So don't talk about politicians. Hashim, any comments from you?
I think the 5 points takeaway is great for me today, and it reflects the whole sum of the graph of meaning and performance. So to me, the lesson learned is those days. For me, exercise means, oh, this is going to be very tough. But now I enjoy going for the walk and then say hello to the neighbors. So when I attach that meaning to a different thing, my performance in exercising is wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Congratulations for that. Alhamdulillah. And Franska, are you there?
Yeah. I'm good, Marzuki. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, everyone, I really appreciate your being here. I hope to see you again in the next session. Next week, we are shifting gears from neurosemantics. We are going into relationship, the series on relationship. And the topic for next week is are generational differences real? Because nowadays we have people in the workplace, we are talking about 4 or 5 generations of people in the workplace. So it's a big headache for some people. So I decided, let's talk about this topic in the context of relationships from the perspective of neurosemantics, of course. So with that, thank you very much, everyone. I hope to see you next week. Good night. God bless. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.